Well, good morning, everyone, and happy Father's Day from the center here. So glad to see everyone that I can't see. This morning, I was wanting to jump into a conversation about Jnana for the Bhakti, or how to use all the richness of the Jnana ideal on your Bhakti path. A few weeks ago, I did a vlog on how the paths in their mature state are the same. Actually, the path of surrender for the Bhakta and the path of neti or self-inquiry for the Jnani, how the actual sadhana is almost identical. And so I was going to kind of, I guess, develop that some more today. But in the process of doing it, it kind of took a different turn, as Mother often does with these things, and sort of turned it into Jnana for the Bhakti, for the Bhakta. So I want to start, as I usually do, with a lovely poem, and because it's Hafiz, of course it's Bhakti. It's called Venus Just Asked Me. Perhaps for just 1 minute out of the day, it may be of value to torture yourself with thoughts like, I should be doing a hell of a lot more with my life than I am, because I'm so darn talented. But remember, for just 1 minute out of the day, with all the rest of your time, it would be best to try looking upon yourself more as God does. For he knows your royal nature. God is never confused and can only see himself in you. My dear, Venus just leaned down and asked me to tell you a secret, to confess. She's just a mirror who has been stealing your light and your music for centuries. She knows, as does Hafiz, you are the sole heir to the king. It's those kinds of inspirations that really keep me interested in finding any way possible to experience that, to see that. You know, we have a problem as humans that we kind of inherit when we're born. And any Vedantist, probably any spiritual seeker, could give you the terms of that we're in a delusion, we're in a fallen state, as it were, that we are married to a mind. We have identified with a mind that's full of impurity, full of the idea of me and mine, and all of the myriad of things that causes us to distort and see and not see in the world around us. That is our one and only problem. No matter how many problems we may rack up for ourselves or how many responsibilities that we have that we think we need to take care of, the fact of the matter is, in your life, you have one singular problem. It's the one thing that's blocking the entire drain. And it's far enough down the pipe that it's blocking all the drains in your house. And most of us are going along trying to undo all of these individual drains and just leaning from one to the next without knowing the one central problem. We're not paying attention to the one central problem, and that is this delusion. So we have to break that identity. We have to know our true nature, find ourself. Words that we've heard again and again and again, but whose meaning, when you contemplate them, is almost infinitely deep, and is a solution to a problem that's just as deep, but really quite as simple. It's one of the things that kind of irks me and tickles me at the same time, that all the sages and many of the avatars have told us several times how easy this is. That it's an obvious thing, that it's, when we find it, when we understand it, it'll be, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I've never seen that before, or that's never been known before, or whatever one says when one doesn't have an eye to say anything. So in the complete work, Swamiji kind of states the problem for the Jnana in this term. He says the Jnani aims at the wholeness of things. That's wholeness, at the oneness of things. And that one absolute, that generalized being, knowing which everything is known. So it's impersonal. It's which I think really attracts the intellect. This idea of God, or this idea of a being, or this idea of something outside of ourselves like that, sometimes feels trivializing to someone thinking along those lines. And they want to go straight to the source. They want to be the king of their own mountain, as it were. And which is a great thing. Of course, Ramakrishna is clear that the fastest and most effective path to finding the truth, to unplugging all of the drains in your home, is divine love, is the path of bhakti, the path of love, because the path and the goal are one and the same. You get to experience the joy of that relationship all the way through, from beginning to end. And it doesn't require near the amount of support, structural support, that the path of Jnana does. There was a time when all of society, or I assume there was a time, it seems like in the scripture that's referenced, that there was a time when all of society kind of huddled around spiritual development, and principles were really part of culture and a part of everyday life. And there were plenty of people to take care of you, and plenty of people to chastise you, and plenty of people to kind of support your efforts toward the ideal, and plenty of places for you to go and do that completely by yourself. The problem with the Jnana practice in the modern world is you might have a great burst of seeing in the morning in your practices, and be in a wonderful state. And then as soon as you get off the bus at work, the world has put all of its make-believe problems back on your plate again, and put you in such a tailspin that all of the wonderful accomplishment of the morning is fettered away, lost, running out through a million holes, a million drains, as it were. And so with bhakti, though, you can practice all the way along, and see your beloved everywhere, and be in conversation with your beloved. He says that the problem for the bhakti is tackled by wishing to realize that one generalized abstract person, in loving whom he loves the entire universe. And so everything can kind of contribute to that practice in a way. Everything can become worship, everything can become sacred, as we'll talk about here in a few moments. So that your life, regardless of what the actual doings are, can become a help, a support, if you spiritualize them, give your mind a twist, so that your simple paperwork in the office is actually offering flowers on a shrine, in a sense, in its truest sense. But what we're having to do at this point, going back to our statement of the original problem, is to get out of mind somehow, to first know of an idea that that's beyond mind. How's that? An idea that's beyond mind. Some identity that we can sort of backtrack into, as it were, to release ourselves from this delusion, from this constant barrage of wrong thinking that we've engaged in, that spins our entire day into a fabric that acts as a veil between us and the truth. And Swamiji talks about this, of course, in the Complete Works. I think he talks about just about everything. But he says the conclusion to which the Bhakta comes is that if you go on merely loving one person after another, you may go on loving them so for an infinite length of time, without being able in the least to love the whole world. When at last the central idea is, however, arrived at, the sum total of all love is God, that the sum total of the aspirations of all souls in the universe, whether they be free or bound or struggling toward liberation, is God, then alone it becomes possible for anyone to put forth universal love. And this is a wonderful practice. I remember just toying with this idea one time in Central Park up in New York for a weekend. We were sitting there, and it was a beautiful Saturday, and the sun was shining, and there were thousands of people in the park, families and couples and individuals and teams, and of literally every color, every hue, every culture, every walk of life. And this idea kind of was rolling around in my mind at that moment. And the charm that I felt, the love, the inspiration that I felt in just seeing God at play in that sense, that here in our essence, there's all of these people that I was watching woke up that morning with no idea of who they are, of what they are, including myself, what the purpose of life really was, what the meaning of things are, what I am, what this universe is. I mean, just born into a complete unknowing. And in the midst of what could be terrifying, in the midst of what could be completely undoing for our personal existence, as it were, for any comfort whatsoever. In the midst of this, everybody had built a dream. Everybody had built an ideal. Everybody had found love and found relationship and was struggling along and pulling some semblance of a life together for themselves and enjoying the divine in knowledge of that or not. And it was such a beautiful feeling, such a beautiful dawning for me at that time. I've never forgotten that idea. And so Swamiji is pointing out that for the bhakti, for the person of devotion, that's what we're trying to do, to see the beloved everywhere, to know the nature of the beloved, and just fall in love. It's a completely natural process. God is that love. And to fall in love with love is effortless. One only needs to become aware of love. One only needs to get to know love, to sort it out, as it were, in that good British sense, to suss it out. He is my lover. I love him, says the Bhakta. In this way, everything becomes sacred to the Bhakta, because all things are his. All are his children, his body, his manifestation. How then may we hurt anyone? How then may we not love anyone? With the love of God will come, as a sure effect, the love of everyone in the universe. The nearer we approach God, the more do we begin to see all things are in him. When the soul succeeds in appropriating the bliss of this supreme love, it also begins to see him in everything. Our heart will thus become an eternal fountain of love. And when we reach even higher states of this love, all the little differences between the things of the world are entirely lost. Man is seen no more as a man, but only as God. The animal, no more as an animal, but as God. Even the tiger, no more a tiger, but a manifestation of God, of the divine. So this is the experience of Swami Vivekananda and hundreds of sages before him, maybe even hundreds of sages with him at that time, who knows. But this is our natural state. This is what it is to be human. This is what it is to be normal. See, it's our delusion, our sense of anxiety, our sense of depression, our sense of loneliness, our sense of isolation, or all these different things. That is not our natural state. That is not the state of a healthy human being. A healthy human being is what we just read from the scriptures from Swamiji there. A normal, healthy human being is in love with life, in love with people, in love with God, in love with the divinity that they're seeing and experiencing in themselves and in everyone. All of this is a result of an intense, all-absorbing love. And from this comes the feeling of perfect self-surrender. And this is where we're going to hang out for a few minutes. The conviction that nothing happens that is against us. Then the loving soul is able to say, if pain comes, welcome pain. If misery comes, it will say, welcome misery. You are also from the beloved. If a serpent comes, it will say, welcome serpent. And if death comes, such a bhakta will welcome it with a smile. Blessed am I that all come to me. They are all welcome. So this is the surrender of a bhakta, a complete acceptance, knowing what? Knowing that nothing that happens is against you, that nothing that happens is to undo you, that all things are working together in your life for your good, for your growth, for your surrender to pure love, for you to get better. It's like a 5-year-old not wanting to take his medicine. I remember that feeling when my mother would walk in with that horrible cough syrup when I was a kid. And as much sugar as they put into that stuff, it was always horrible. And, you just didn't want any of it. And then you couldn't get that taste out of your mouth fast enough. And, I'm afraid that in the beginning in spiritual life, and really the spiritual life that most of the world reacts against when there is a reaction against spiritual life, is against that period. And for that reason, having to take that medicine, it's not necessarily enjoyable at the beginning. At the beginning, it seems like a lot too much renunciation. Like, oh, I have to do away with everything that I think I like, because we haven't come to any understanding about what we're doing and how it's affecting us. And so we feel that pain of separation. Oh my gosh, I can't do that. Oh my gosh, not that. And then we're like, but I am, and we withdraw into that ego self in defense, and want to push everything away and find everything wrong we can with everything religious, everyone religious, every institution religious, to go and find everything wrong with it so that we can be very, very comfortable and self-satisfied, not being a part of that and not having to take another spoonful of that horrible medicine, as it were. But it's for our own good, and that's one of the fundamental promises of God. It says so in the Christian Bible also, which is again one of those things I really enjoy when I find these cross references behind all these different practices, where St. Paul says that all things work together to good for those that love God. Everything in your life is working for your success. And what a great place to sit and ponder when you are feeling completely different from that. When you're feeling like, how could mother take that person from me? How could this friendship break? How could that have happened? How could I have lost that job? How could I have this stress? It's a great reflection to sit and to really try and find the perspective where your beloved is. Why that happened, and how that happened for your betterment. How to make gold out of every moment. That's something I like to talk about from Swami Prabhupada, and all of you have heard it before. He says that that's where your karma is. Karma is not in what's happening to you. It's what you're able to do with what is happening to you. And he always made that example of the two men in a wheelchair. He said both men were able to walk, and both men lost their ability to walk. One man becomes bitter, angry that he lost his ability to walk, and focuses on what he's not able to do, and gets angry about all those who are insensitive and not thinking about his needs and not thinking about his disability and demanding his respect and his rights for that. And he grows bitter and alone. He says the other man accepts his disability and takes it as a challenge, takes it as an exploration. What can I do in spite of this? And becomes, joins into the Special Olympics and becomes a gold medalist, and then becomes a motivational speaker and inspires thousands of young people who can't walk to be the best they can. Two men with the same thing that happened to them. So in a sense, some would say, oh, they had bad karma. No. To the man that turned it into gold, it was a great karma. It was good karma. Because as Swami Prabhupada said, and he said he said that a lot of people won't agree with this statement, but he told me anyway. He says that karma, he says, at the end of my life, I think karma is not what happens to you, but what you're able to do with what happens to you. If you have good karma, you can turn anything into gold. And so really karma, again, is of the mind and of your disposition, and you carry it with you. God is not doing it to you. You're carrying it with you. It's your mind that exacts payment. It's your mind that has established cause and effect, and it's within you. And as long as you identify with it, as long as you hold on to it as your very own, yes, indeed, you suffer for it. But that's the trick. That's the secret we're going to look at today, is that, as Mother says, this moment you can have your realization. That wouldn't be true if karma was an absolute truth. Everything would have to be paid for. But there is a secret passage. There is a secret loophole for getting around this debt. In this sublime resignation, everything in the shape of attachment goes away completely, except that one all-absorbing love to Him in whom all things live and move and have their being. This attachment of love to God is indeed one that does not bind the soul, but effectively breaks all of its bondages. This love is the thing that breaks all of your bondages, the thing that breaks all of your karma. Love is the set of scissors to cut your bonds, to set you free. But you have to be willing to let it go, because that's the magic part that Mother adds to that statement. She says, you can have your enlightenment this very moment. And then she says the magic words, if you want it. If you want it. And this is where the real contemplation happens. Why is it that you're holding on to the things that you're holding on to? Why is it that you identify so tightly with the mind and the world that you've created for yourself? How does it serve you? And that's where discrimination begins. That's where discernment begins. To go in and look at, why am I holding on to my depression? It's important to know that you're not a victim of any of these things. You're holding on to them on purpose. And your task in your discrimination and your discernment is to find out why. What lie are you believing about these things serving you? You know, in depression, what satisfaction am I getting? Is it making my life seem more authentic? Is it making me somehow seem more real, more responsible? You know, am I a better person because I suffer for myself? You know, these ideas to dig down and find out why it is that you hold on to the things in your life that make you suffer, and then apply the truth to them. Know the nature of things. You know, Thakur says God alone is real. Love alone is real. Everything else is make-believe. So anything that's not love or not perceived as love, you're looking at through a false lens, a lens of misunderstanding. Because all things are done by love, for love, to bring you to love. And until you find the place where you can look at the mind and understand that, by letting go of the things that are blocking that perspective, then round and round you go. And better to admit that you enjoy it and let it wear itself out, or let go of it with a fervor unmatched. Let go and run and have your realization in this very moment. Be free. Know that you can. Know that it's possible. It's a promise direct from the Divine Mother. But you have to give everything to Him. Thakur says in the Gospel, Ramakrishna, he says, surrender everything at the feet of God. Surrender everything. What else can you do? There's a part of discrimination right there too. What else are you going to do? Nisargadatta, I think I read that in his book, I Am That. He said, you know, the difference between the sage and the sinner. He says, when he plays chess with God, the sage knows that his first move is to lay the king down, to admit that there is no first move for playing chess with the divine. He says, but the sinner will actually make a move. The sinner will actually think he can improve this moment of his own accord. The saint knows this moment is perfect as it is, accepts that, and sees love and divinity in it. He says, surrender to God, everything at the feet of God. What else can you do? Give Him that power of attorney. Let Him do whatever He thinks is best. If you rely on a great man, he will never injure you. There's another promise right there. Another beautiful, beautiful promise from Him. That the divine will never do anything to injure you. Now immediately you start thinking of all the times you've been injured, and you'll know that you have never been injured if you've read the Gita. The soul cannot be burned, cannot be wetted, cannot be hurt. Yourself is the great meditator. Yourself is that divine love sitting in its wonderful absorption forever. The body's been injured, the ego's been injured, the mind's been injured. All of those things have been injured, none of which are yourself, none of which are to be taken personally. All of them are signs for inquiry. You know, any sign of injury, any sign of pain is an invitation to inquiry, to find the nature of it, to find out why it hurts. The body hurts when it's trying to bring healing to something. You know, the body hurts when something is wrong and needs to be changed, needs to be fixed. So pain in our life is meant for that. And it's good to know that that pain is caused by love, for love, to bring about love, and for us to get busy about using it that way, to get serious about our faith and understanding that, and to cling to those ideals, not let go of them, not forget them in the most important time. Ramana Maharshi talks about surrender quite a bit in a beautiful way. He's really the impetus for this talk for me. One of his students put together a wonderful paper that I have on the vlog linked somewhere if someone wants to read it, that kind of draws these paths together, this bhakti and this jnana practices. He says, in surrender, there is no room for stray desires, no room for expectation of miracles. If you have surrendered, you must be able to abide by the will of God and not make a grievance out of what may or may not please you. So that surrender is absolute. If you read about Girish Ghosh and his giving the power of attorney to God, you begin to understand what it means. That yes, God will do everything for you if you ask, if you lay down your own will, if you lay down your own goals, your own efforts, if you lay them down and surrender them. You know, the Gita is very clear. You have no right. It says it uses those words even, are very strong words. You have no right to the fruits of your actions. It's amazing. That's the terms. That is the way to this bliss. What a requirement of faith that is. It's like getting into a roller coaster. You know, you have to have a lot of faith that that one bar is going to hold you in as you go through 3 or 4 loops and around a couple of corkscrews. And yet, when you're finished, I was like, "Wow, that was great. Let's do it again." But you know, if you ever gone on a roller coaster, you go that first hill and you come over that top and you go over the edge. Holy cow! You start to wonder, "Oh my God, have I done the right thing here?" You know. But then the end result is always fantastic, wonderful. And I tell you, there has not been a single time in my life when I have tried renunciation, tried a little bit of faith, where I might have sweated out a little bit at the beginning. But always to this day, I can say, wow, that was great. That's the way to do it. Most definitely, that's the way to do it. So if you have surrendered, you must be able to abide by the will of God. That's where the faith is. Thakur says faith is at the root of everything. It's that inner knowing that the nature of the universe is love. In the face of the most horrific challenge to that idea, not letting go, understanding the nature of this universe is love. It will do nothing to injure you. He says, when you pray in this state of surrender, Ramana Maharshi says, you pray to God saying, this is your problem, not mine. Please attend to it in any way that you see fit. With this attitude, you may surrender all of your troubles to the Lord. So it's not praying for particular outcomes. Interestingly enough, too, Paul says the highest prayer is, may your will be done. That's the highest form of prayer. Because it removes that self that's standing in a perspective of blindness. Yeah, you have no idea what's better for you. You know, you pray for lots of wealth. Well, you might get lots of wealth and never, ever again think of the divine. Never, ever again feel any impetus to find the nature of yourself, to find the immortal bliss. You know, I remember a good friend of mine who does elder care, worked for a very, very wealthy woman. I mean, wealth beyond what even I could imagine having. And in her last days, for the last couple of years of her life, she could not get out of bed. She was in one room. She had several mansions to choose from. She was a huge socialite. Her family had built Symphony Hall, you know, several national parks named after her. And what was it to her as she laid in bed? What were those other mansions to her that she could have been in? Those gardens, those estates, what were they? Those fancy cars, what were they? The only person she saw all day was my friend who was taking care of her. And she was angry and she was bitter to the very end about that, demanding respect, demanding, you know, everything from the people around her. And my friend said that, you know, it was horrible to hear the family in the other room, that they were just literally waiting for her to go. One, because she had been so bitter, but two, because they all wanted all of those things that she wasn't using right now. So those are the things. That's knowing how to pray. You know, your mind and body might say, I want wealth, but your soul isn't going to say that. Your inner contentment isn't going to ask for that. Your inner love isn't going to ask for that. You'll never be able to touch those things again with all of that distraction, with all of that empowerment for your delusion. You'll never find your way home. So know how to pray, he says. Surrender all your troubles to the Lord by giving them to him and understanding it's his trouble. It's his job. He's the one deluded through you anyway, in a sense. It's his to sort out. Let it be sorted out and accept what comes. So one of the questioners comes to Ramana Maharshi and says, well, how do you surrender, since the mere desire to surrender invents an illusory person who's going to surrender? A wonderful catch-22. This is precisely our problem. We are an imaginary existence. We don't have an existence that's separate and apart from our beloved. But we've invented one, and if we invented one just to pray for surrender, well, that's pretty good. Chances are we've invented one to do a whole lot of other things, that haven't been helpful, that haven't worked us to our realization, to our knowledge of ourselves. And so what does he say? He says the key to this problem, and the key to all problems, is to bypass the mind and move to the realm of being. Now, there's a fascinating idea. To become aware of the mind as something separate from yourself. It's very obvious, if you do some practice and pay some attention, that the mind is not you. Anything that you experience, by necessity, is not you. Otherwise, how could you experience it? It requires something touching something else, or something presenting itself to something else. In order to think, something has to present something to you in the mind. In order to feel, something has to present something to you in the mind. Anything that you feel, anything that you think, anything that occurs to you is not you by necessity, by obvious necessity. If you pay any attention at all, go in there and see. I'm looking at all these things. If I'm the one looking, if it's being presented to me, how can it be me? So Ramana Maharshi is saying the shortcut is to know that, to stick by that. Now that takes as much faith as to believe that everything comes from love for your benefit. It's a different kind of faith, but it's the same idea. To really believe that the mind is separate and that all of these things are not you takes a lot of solitude, takes a lot of deep-rooted awareness, paying attention to everything, because constantly that little thread of delusion is trying to find a loop to hook in you, constantly trying to take you along for that ride on the roller coaster. Ramana Maharshi goes on, he says, it is enough that one surrenders oneself. Surrender is to give oneself up to the original cause of one's being. These are all beautiful little sayings that you can just sit for a long time and really just soar in contemplating. What is he saying? This sense of being. He says surrender comes down to two words. You know what they are? These two words, being and stillness. That's the meaning of surrender, being and stillness. The practice is to find within oneself this feeling of beingness and surrender oneself to it completely. So in you, that sense of isness, that existence, that Sat Chit Ananda in there, that component, the one of the three there, that sense of being, your very existence. Go to the source of that. Go to that as the source of mind. So don't pay attention to any of the thoughts. He goes on to here and talks about it some more. Holy Mother says, spiritual practice in a solitary place is essential. All right. So if you had any question as to whether you should be practicing, or if you should have any kind of regular place or a place of no distraction, it's utterly essential according to our Divine Mother. Spiritual practice in a solitary place is essential, right? How can you not be involved with your thoughts if you're not in a solitary and quiet place? Where are you going to rest in order to notice your distraction if you are actively distracted? You can't. You're going to be mixed into that bowl of whatever is being baked up at any given moment. You won't be free. When worldly thoughts, now this is Mother telling, this isn't Ramana Maharshi, although it's going to sound very much like him. When worldly thoughts crop up in your mind and they possess it, then you should go away from the company of others and pray to him with tears in your eyes. He will remove all the dross of your mind and will also give you understanding. So that's bypassing the mind. Whenever these thoughts arise in your mind and you start paying attention to them, they start hooking you in. You start reacting to them, planning on them, mourning them, celebrating them. what does Mother say? She says, run away. She says, get away from the environment, from whatever is fooling you, from whatever's triggering you, from whatever's convincing you that you are these thoughts and these behaviors. Get out of that situation and go. And with tears in your eyes, what she means, do this. She means do it from your heart at a fundamental level. You need to be serious about your spiritual life. You need to be intense about it. This is what it takes for us to come to any semblance of understanding about these wonderful, amazing things that will be beyond anything that we've paid, anything that we've given up, any effort that we've made. It will be so far beyond that, to go with tears in your eyes and pray to God. And she makes a promise to you. The Divine Mother makes a promise. We'll always pay attention to that. The Divine Mother promises, He will remove all of the dross from your mind. He will remove all of the nonsense that is preventing you from having a great life, from having a life of bliss, a life of joy and wonder and fulfillment, a life of meaning, of depth, and of richness. He will remove all of the things in your mind and will give you understanding. So He'll take it away, and not just take away the problem, He'll establish you in an understanding so it doesn't have to come back again. That's the promise. So if you find yourself being caught up in your mind, in your environment, in your relationships, in your jobs and families and entertainments and distractions, if you run away to a solitary place and pray to your beloved, He will help. He'll undo those things. He'll set you free, and He'll give you strength to remain that way. But you have to do it. It is essential, Mother says. So immediately a disciple, might be one of you, might be me, says to the Divine Mother, I don't have enough strength for doing spiritual discipline. I have surrendered myself to your holy feet. Please do as you will. Now look at that. He stated the problem right away. I don't have the strength for this. But he's surrendered. And how do we know he's surrendered? Because he doesn't say, fix it. He doesn't say, make it right. What's he say? Please do as you will. So this disciple, although feeling the weakness and feeling the inability to do it, has come to a true sense of surrender. Do as you will. I accept my lot. I accept this. Please do as you will. And this is what Mother does. With folded palms, the Mother began to pray to the Master. May the Master protect you in your vows of sannyasa. He is looking after you. What should you be afraid of? If the mind is kept engaged in some work, it doesn't indulge in silly thoughts. But if you sit idle, the mind is likely to indulge in various kinds of thoughts. So she tells him, now, in one sense, she was his wife. So she had a direct avenue to Thakur. So she's not making something up here. She's telling him like it is. He will take care of you. He is taking care of you. He does have you in His hands. You will be okay. Keep working, Keep yourself busy in the effort to try. You may be weak. You may not be able to do it. You may not be able to whatever. There's 1,000 reasons. You've surrendered that. Don't let that take up your mind anymore. Don't let that build its own castle of distraction in your head. Admit it and go forward. Keep trying. Do your best. By doing that, you'll engage your mind in things that are beautiful, in things that will remind you of your nature. And you won't be distracted by silly thoughts. And really they are silly. At best, our biggest problems are silly. When measured against death, who cares? Almost everything comes up, who cares? If it were not for the love behind all of this, really and truly life is just one big who cares. And that's why it's so important that we find that one essential thing that is behind everything. Because without that one essential thing behind everything, suicide is reasonable. Now that's a hard thing to say, and it's a cold thing to say. But without the divine, that's an honesty, you know. That's why it's important that we touch this reality, that we spend our efforts and our energies and our focus to find this for ourselves. And through that wonderful life that will come from that, we give a hint to everyone around us. And that's the nature of love. That's the nature of service. So the disciple comes back to her and says, well, what can repetition of his name really achieve? You know, what's that going to do if it's not attended to with earnestness? You know, if we're sitting there doing our meditation. And of course, Mother has a wonderful thing, and none of this is new, I don't think, but they're wonderful teachings that we should really constantly remind ourselves about. Mother says, you know, regardless of whether you get into the water willingly or if you're pushed, your clothes are going to get soaked. So whether or not you meant to jump into that pool, you're going in. So chill out on that. Practice meditation regularly. Don't give it up. Yeah, so you're lousy at it. So you're a terrible disciple. Yes, there's nothing of any value in you whatsoever. You're a terrible person all the way through. So what? Take the Lord's name. You're getting wet. You're going in this pool, and do it regularly. Sit there and be horrible at it regularly, you know. But don't give it up because you don't think you're good at it or that it's not going anywhere. She says, practice your meditation regularly, for your mind is still unripe, right? If you eat a gosh, what is it? The persimmon. If you eat a persimmon before it's ripe, your whole face will pucker. It's a terrible experience. So what do? Throw all the persimmons out? No. You wait until they ripen. You do the work, you know, you let them ripen. Well, it's your mind, it's the same thing. Yeah, right now it's a distracted, agitated, you know, drunk monkey stung by a scorpion. Yeah, it is. Keep doing your practice. It will ripen, she says. She says, your mind is still unripe. After prolonged practice of meditation, your mind will become steady. Okay, another promise. Mark these down. These are promises from the beloved. If you're doing spiritual life, it's because you believe these promises. If you're not reminding yourself of these promises and you're not finding an amazing amount of joy in them, you're not doing it right. Hold on to these promises. They're amazing and they're direct. She doesn't put any conditions on them. She's saying this will happen. This is a promise. You know, after prolonged practice of meditation, your mind will become steady. And you should constantly discriminate between the real and the unreal. You know, that's separating, that's that bypassing the mind aspect. The mind is full of wrong thinking, things that are not real. You know, you assign reasons for everything everybody else is doing. You have no idea what the reasons are for why they're doing it. Why do you assume you do? You know, that person didn't take your fork because they hate you. That person didn't take your shoes because they think you're terrible. You know, it's like you come up with these make-believe worlds that you live in by assuming all of these wrong things about everything around you. What is the only true assumption? The world will do nothing, that the divine will do nothing to injure you, that all things are working together for your good, whatever it is. You bypass the mind by holding on to that truth. Don't listen to the stories of wrong thinking. Anytime you begin to think or cognate about those things that you don't know anything about, stop. Run away to a solitary place. You're being distracted and deluded. You're in an emergency situation and you've never realized it. Run away. Save yourself. Find your solitary place and beg the beloved. Do as you please. Take care of this. It's your trouble. I return to my sense of being, my sense of peace. I return to the root of my faith. She said, know the worldly objects to which the mind is drawn to be unreal and surrender your mind to God. So know that these things are pulling at you. You know, all of your vices, the things that are just constantly pulling you out of that place of inner peace, all of those things that are pulling you out of that sense of contentment by telling you lies. You need this, you must have this, you won't be good without this, you'll be better with this. All of those things, know they are unreal. They cannot give or be what they promise. They are a fire that will only get bigger and brighter and hotter and burn you more. The more you invest in them, the more you walk into them, the more you believe that lie. So stop it. That is surrender. Surrender your mind to God. What does that mean? Surrender your mind to love. Surrender your mind to intelligence. And Ramana Maharshi's favorite, surrender your mind to the sense of being. Come back to this moment. Feel the wonder of being alive, the wonder of this experience. Know the worldly objects which the mind is drawn to be unreal, and surrender your mind to God. A man is angling in a pond all by himself when the bridegroom's procession with its music passed by, but his eyes remained fixed on the float. You know, we don't get distracted. That's what she's saying. What's the float? The float is your sense of being, your sense of love, the root of mind, the root of this imagined experience. The root is love. The root is that sense of being. Be established in that. Let as many processions go by you of bridegrooms or Mardi Gras or whatever they are. Let all of the parades of the senses go by you. Your mind is firmly established in this beautiful sense of being, this wonder of this moment, of your own existence, of this amazing movie that you're watching, whose name is divine, Bhagavan, beloved. His eyes remain fixed on the float. Ramana Maharshi says the practice, he sums up the practice, and he always talks in those very neutral, organic terms. It doesn't get any personalities involved. He says the practice is giving up wrong ideas. Who doesn't want to give up a wrong idea? The practice is giving up wrong ideas by refusing to give attention to them. That's renunciation. The idea of something for pleasure comes up. But you don't get all tied up in a knot about it. Oh my God, my mind is thinking horrible things. Oh, I'm such a terrible person. That's just identity. You're getting all tied up in a gnarl for nothing because you've identified with something silly in the mind, what Mother calls a silly thought. See it as a silly thought and let it go. Anything more than that is a delusion of one form or another. Whatever it is. You may not go after the thing of pleasure, but you'll get all tied up in yourself about being so weak and ineffectual in your meditations and how ugly of a person you are because that thought even occurred to you. Well, that thought didn't occur to you. That thought occurred. That's all. And you observed it. That's all. There's no more of a relationship than that, unless you want there to be. And that's where we come back to the loop. You can have your realization at this very moment if you want it. So when you sit there in that place of being, in that repose of love, in that place of existence, knowledge, bliss, that is outside of the mind, watching the body. As you sit there, know what you want as a frame of speaking. When that thought of desire, that thought of pleasure, that thought of advancement, that thought of ego, that thought of success, that thought of comfort, of money, whatever it is, comes, don't freak out. Just don't pay attention to it. Let it go. And the next thought will come behind it. And that's it. That's all. It's a matter of habit, really. Samskara is just a fancy word for habit. And another word for silly thinking. Yeah, you've run after that thought so many times. That's a samskara. So what? You don't have to do it this time. You're not a slave to anything. You're free if you want to be. He said it is only wrong ideas that separate us from a full awareness of our natural state. It's only those wrong ideas that you need something outside of yourself for this moment to be perfect. That's the wrong idea. I think that might be the only one. That's the only wrong idea, that you think that there is something necessary to make this moment perfect. And you go running after it. And the moment was already perfect to the knower of who he is. To someone who doesn't know what he is, well, no moment's perfect because you're not standing on anything. You have no stable center of perspective. You're going to see the world differently at every turn. And at every turn, it's going to seem like you need something else. And round and round and round it goes. Great fun, if you're having fun. A great sadness when you're not. Shift from the world of thoughts to the feeling of being. Now, that's an interesting idea, and that takes some development. First, you have to identify that feeling of being, because that sense is you. You know, it is you. It's where you exist. But it can only be implicated. You can't see it because you can't look at it. It's like your face. It's there. It's implied by all the sensations. You know there's one there, but you don't know what it is. It's the same with finding your sense of being. It's implicated by all that's moving. Let all that moves be the implication that you are not. That's how you know it's moving. You know, let the activity of the mind be the implication that you are not active. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see it move. You are in a stationary place that has never moved. When you sit for meditation, you are the ultimate meditator. You have been sitting there in stillness, unmoved for millions of years, eons, since the mysteries we don't even know what to call. You have been sitting still and watching this marvel of being. Find that place that has been sitting there long before this body. Find that place that has been meditating long before this attempt. Find that place that's not impatient because it's eternal. It has forever and has been forever. Find that place. It's implicated by all the things that are trying to distract you. See all the change as an implication of your unchanging self. Sit there and know that. He says, just keep quiet. And here's an unusual time when he actually refers to God as a beloved. He said, Bhagavan will do the rest. Bhagavan will do the rest. Sit there and be still in that place. Insist on the moment being perfect, that all things are working together for good, that the universe will never harm you, and Bhagavan will take care of the rest. This shifting of attention is the ultimate act of surrender. So surrender doesn't have to be about 10 billion things. Surrender is about one thing. It's letting go of the thought of the moment that's trying to make the moment better. And reminding yourself the moment cannot be better. It is perfect. You know? Worship and devotion are aids in this effort. You know, those are things that you do with the mind that don't pull you out of that being, that sense of completeness. They're celebrations of that. Worship is a celebration. Worship isn't something you do. Worship is a reaction to being in the presence of God, the presence of divine love, the presence of divine presence. That worship happens. Worship is not something that's done. Put yourself in the presence of your beloved and let worship happen. Put yourself in the presence of this divine being, this sense of being, and let devotion happen. He says there are two main acknowledgments that you have to make in order to be successful at this. He says, this is a good one. This is one that'll throw you for a loop for sure. Nothing that is understood or believed is of any use. Mental activity is counterproductive. That's wonderful. Nothing that you understand or believe is of any use. It's not something that happens in the mind. That's why this is so difficult for us. We can't imagine, literally, we can't imagine anything that's not in the mind. The mind is where we live. And we live there because we think it's who we are. We think it's what we are. We let it define us. At every moment, we ask it how we're doing, what we're thinking. Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I depressed? You know, you stop. Who cares whether the mind is happy or depressed? Who cares what the mind needs or is imagined? Nothing that you've understood and nothing that you believe is of any use. And the second main acknowledgement, acceptance of the idea that all striving and all notions of attainment are futile and illusory. The idea that all striving and all notions of attainment are futile and illusory. So that means we're looking for an isness. We have to give up this idea of improving the moment, of becoming a better anything, of becoming, it's not about becoming. It's about being. And you have to discover that. But you can only do it by letting go, right? In the Gospel, in chapter 5, about separating from the mind, Thakur says one should have burning faith in God, that one can say, what? I have repeated the name of God. Can sin still cling to me? How can I be a sinner anymore? How can I be in bondage anymore? It's that absolute faith, that absolute understanding. I am. I have said the name of God. I've gotten wet. It's done. I'm free. I'm free. I'm free. And in the face of any thought, you answer, I'm free. In the face of any thought, you answer, I'm free. I'm free. I am content. I'm in love. I'm fulfilled. I need nothing. I have been here for 10 million years, and I will be here indefinitely more. He says the problem, then this is from the Jnanic perspective now, most of it. He says the problem is the idea that there is a separate self that needs to be dissolved into this unity. That's the problem that you think you need to that you need to be absorbed into God, that you need to be, that you need anything. The problem at the moment is finding that union with the beloved. The fact that you believe that there's anything that needs to be done, that's the trouble. He says anything that the individual self tries to do to eliminate itself merely prolongs its own existence. Ramana goes on to say, the removal of ignorance is the aim of practice, not the acquisition of realization. So it's an undoing. You're not trying to build the castle of realization. Anything composed must decompose. We know that is one of our fundamental truths. So don't make that mistake of thinking, oh, I'm going to build realization. I'm going to build a great devotee out of me. I'm going to build a great sannyasin. I'm going to build a great householder. I'm going to build a great anything. No, I'm going to undo my ignorance. I'm going to undo ignorance. Ooh, don't even let the mind get in there. Ignorance is undone. And he says there's three to do this. He says that to do this ignorance removal, there's three tenets to be remembered. One, we are realized here and now. Okay, so realization is not something that needs to be done. It's something that has to be uncovered as such. And by even letting go of that idea, it becomes more obvious. It's one of those fundamental tenets of faith. This is that burning faith that Thakur was talking about, in having taken the name of God. It's already done. I've taken the name of God once. It's finished. What am I, a sinner now? Forget it. Does any of this have any power over me? No. What's Thakur pointing to? He's talking about this very same thing, just in a different paradigm, a different word. You are realized here and now. Sadhana is to remove the idea that we are not. Sadhana is to remove the idea that we are not perfect in this moment, as it is. The second tenet, there is no individual self to extinguish, and there never has been. This lower sense of I that you've imagined, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle where you take that last piece out and the whole thing falls down. There's nothing there. It's the inside of the onion, according to Thakur. There's nothing there. That's the ultimate realization. So sit in that nothing. Get ahead of the game. And number three, no amount of mental sadhana is helpful. That's an interesting one. For the mind can only extend the frontiers of its own ignorance. He's just trying to get you to believe and understand this doesn't happen in mind. You are not the mind. You are utterly not the mind. Let go of it. Don't let it define you anymore. Don't let it plan your future anymore. Be awake, fully aware of the moment. That's what being awake means. You're fully here. You're not tied up partly in tomorrow. You're not tied up in partly of yesterday. You're here and seeing things as they are, undefined by those imaginary states. And that happens to be pure love. That happens to be pure existence. That happens to be pure intelligence. If you are perfectly aware of those things, you will never make a wrong move. Those are the things that manifest God, manifest the divinity within you. You have to live in a constant awareness of this truth, he says. The purpose of self-inquiry is to focus the entire mind on its source, on its being. The source is that which is watching it, that which it is dancing for. Put all of your attention on that whom the mind is dancing for, who the mind is playing the movie for. He says the fact is that your mind is only a bundle of thoughts. How can you extinguish it by the thought of doing so, or by a desire? Your thoughts and desires are part and parcel of that mind. And Sri Nisargadatta says the same things. He says, do you not understand that your quest for happiness is the reason that you are not happy? It's the same idea. It's the magic. And it's a tough one to believe, because we've never believed it. We really believe the answer lies in our personality, in the way that we think, the way that we move. You know, in the Gita, the battle, you know, your body is the field. You are the battle of Kurukshetra, as it were. And what does Krishna tell Arjuna? He says, it's done. These people are already dead. All of your attachments, all of your attractions, all of your aversions, all of your troubles, they're already done, already finished. And you didn't do any of it. The universal I did it all. That was the truth. That was how Arjuna came to peace with the battle there on the field, knowing this is a story. This is meaningless in the ultimate sense. Being here in the presence of the divine is the importance of this moment. You don't have to know who won that battle to get the value of the Gita, because that's not the point of the Gita. The point of the Gita is Arjuna's basking in the presence of Krishna and learning all of there was to learn. He says the method is this, and we'll end with this, even though there's plenty more. When thoughts arise, one does not allow them to develop. Instead, ask, to whom do these thoughts occur? Ask further, who is this I to whom they occur? What is this in me that I keep calling I? Shift attention from the world of thoughts to this sense of being. The thought of I will gradually give way to the feeling of I. Very different thing. The thought of I will give way to the feeling of I. Right? He says, do not meditate. Do not think that you are. Simply be. Simply be. He says, in the end, there is only being and the awareness of being. For us as devotees, being is our beloved, the presence of our beloved within. The awareness of being is who we think we are. You know, it's the devotee. So we are thinking of God, and we are dancing in that eternal relationship with the beloved. In the essence, we are that already, and all the joy that we hope to get from our practice and all the thrill of realization is already here, already within, just waiting for you to find it through the implication of all this change, to turn your gaze to that which isn't changing, to that which isn't needy, to that which isn't insecure, to that which doesn't need anybody's approval or any more money or any more security or any more relationship or any more children or any more adventure or any more distraction of any kind. That self, which in the end will be what you sit with when this body falls off, find it now. Die to that lower self now and be. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji.